The pyramids are among the most studied structures on Earth, yet some of the most basic questions about their construction remain unanswered. The mainstream view holds that these monuments were built by ancient Egyptians, but the question remains: how, with what tools, and at what level of organization? This is an examination of what the evidence actually shows. The Great Pyramid of Khufu contains approximately 2.3 million stone blocks. Each block weighs, on average, 2.5 tons. Some granite blocks in the King's Chamber weigh up to 80 tons. The pyramid was built, according to conventional chronology, in roughly 20 years. This would require setting one block every 2 to 3 minutes, working day and night without interruption. The base of the pyramid is leveled to within 2.1 centimeters across its 230-meter width. The sides align almost perfectly with the cardinal directions: north, south, east, and west, with an error of only 3 arc minutes. The challenge isn't denying Egyptian involvement. It's understanding the full extent of their capabilities. To understand how the pyramids were built, we must begin where the stones themselves began, in the quarries. The bulk of the limestone used in the Great Pyramid came from quarries located on the Giza Plateau itself, just south of the pyramid. These quarries still exist today, carved into the desert bedrock, their ancient tool marks still visible after 4,500 years. But the finer white limestone casing stones, the ones that once gave the pyramid its smooth, gleaming appearance, came from Tura, across the Nile. And the massive granite blocks in the King's Chamber traveled even farther, from Aswan, 800 kilometers to the south. Archaeological evidence shows the Egyptians used copper tools, copper chisels, copper saws, along with harder stones like dolerite as pounders. Copper is soft, softer than many of the stones they were cutting. Yet experiments conducted by modern archaeologists have demonstrated that copper tools, when used with abrasive sand and considerable effort, can indeed cut limestone. The process is slow, painstaking, but possible. For granite, the evidence suggests they used dolerite balls, extremely hard stones, to pound and pulverize the granite surface. Teams of workers would strike the same spot repeatedly, gradually wearing away the rock. Again, slow, labor-intensive, but achievable. But cutting the stone was only the beginning. Each block, once freed from the bedrock, had to be moved. The quarries on the Giza Plateau provided some advantage. The stone didn't have far to travel. But the granite from Aswan? 800 kilometers. And some of those blocks weighed 80 tons. The Nile was the highway of ancient Egypt. During the annual flood season, the river would rise, and temporary canals could be dug closer to construction sites. Boats capable of carrying these massive stones have been found. Dismantled, yes, but real. The Khufu ship, discovered in a sealed pit near the pyramid, measures 43 meters long and could have carried tremendous weight. But even with boats, the stones still had to be loaded, transported, unloaded, and then moved, somehow, to the construction site. Moving a 2.5-ton block of stone is one thing. Moving millions of them is something else entirely. The most widely accepted theory involves sledges, simple wooden platforms, and lubrication. In 2013, physicists discovered that wetting the sand in front of the sledge reduces friction significantly. A wall painting in the tomb of Jehutihotep from the Middle Kingdom appears to show exactly this. A worker pouring water in front of a sledge carrying a massive statue. The physics work. With wet sand, a team of perhaps 20 to 30 workers could pull a block weighing several tons. But sledges alone couldn't move stones up the pyramid. As the structure rose higher, some form of ramp would have been necessary. No definitive evidence of a construction ramp survives at Giza. This is not surprising. Ramps would have been dismantled after construction. But evidence of ramps exists at other pyramid sites, and several theories have been proposed. The first, a single, massive external ramp leading straight up one face of the pyramid. But the calculations show that such a ramp would need to be impossibly long, over a mile, and would require more material than the pyramid itself. The second, a spiral ramp wrapping around the pyramid as it rose. More efficient, but it would obscure the corners, the very points that needed the most precision during construction. The third, an internal ramp system, spiraling upward within the pyramid itself. This theory, proposed by architect Jean-Pierre Houdin, is supported by microgravimetric studies suggesting less dense areas inside the pyramid that could represent filled-in ramp passages. Whichever method was used, the effort required was staggering. And it wasn't just about brute force. The blocks had to be placed with extraordinary precision. The gaps between stones are often measured in millimeters. In some places, you cannot fit a blade between them. No mortar was used in the core blocks, just precisely cut stone fitting against precisely cut stone. This level of accuracy, maintained across millions of blocks, suggests not just skilled workers, but a sophisticated system of measurement and quality control. For over 2,000 years, visitors to the pyramids assumed they were built by slaves. The Greek historian Herodotus, writing in the 5th century BCE, already 2,000 years after the pyramids were built, repeated stories of 100,000 oppressed workers laboring under the whip. But the archaeological evidence tells a different story. In the 1990s, archaeologist Mark Lehner and his team discovered the remains of a workers' village near the Giza Plateau. This wasn't a slave camp. The workers were housed, fed, and given medical care. Bakeries capable of producing thousands of loaves daily. Cattle bones showing the workers were fed meat regularly, a luxury in ancient Egypt. Evidence of healed fractures in workers' skeletons, suggesting they received medical treatment and recovered. Graffiti left by work gangs, boasting names like Friends of Khufu and Drunkards of Menkaure. Not the marks of enslaved laborers, but of organized teams with pride in their work. Current estimates suggest the core workforce consisted of around 20 to 30,000 workers, not the 100,000 Herodotus claimed. These were not slaves, but conscripted peasants, working during the flood season when agricultural work was impossible. It was, in effect, a form of national service. a tax paid in labor rather than goods. And in a society where the pharaoh was seen as a living god, working on his eternal resting place would have been considered not just a duty, but a religious honor. But organizing such a workforce, coordinating the quarrying, transportation, and placement of millions of stones required more than religious devotion. It required bureaucracy. Ancient Egypt was one of the most administratively sophisticated civilizations of the ancient world. Scribes recorded everything. Rations distributed, tools issued, work shifts completed. Overseers managed teams. Architects planned. Engineers calculated. This wasn't chaos. This was a project planned and executed with precision over decades. And yet, questions remain. The blocks in the king's chamber, solid granite, each weighing up to 80 tons, were lifted over 40 meters above ground level. Even with ramps, even with teams of workers, moving such weight to such a height represents an engineering challenge that is difficult to fully explain with the tools we know they had. The casing stones that once covered the pyramid's exterior were cut and fitted so precisely that they created a smooth, gleaming surface. When these stones were removed in later centuries, looted for building projects in Cairo, the precision of their fit was remarked upon by medieval observers. How were such stones cut so accurately? How were they polished so smooth? Copper tools and dolerite pounders can shape stone, yes, but achieving this level of finish consistently across thousands of casing stones implies a level of skill, or perhaps technique, that we may not fully understand. The alignment of the Great Pyramid is extraordinary. Its base is level to within 2.1 centimeters over an area the size of 7 city blocks. Its sides are aligned to the cardinal directions with an accuracy of 3 arc minutes. That's 1/20th of a single degree. Modern surveyors, even with advanced instruments, would be challenged to match this precision over such a scale. The ancient Egyptians achieved it using only the stars, the sun, and simple tools. The internal chambers of the pyramid are equally precise. The Grand Gallery, a corbelled passage leading to the king's chamber, rises at an angle of 26 degrees. Its walls are perfectly smooth, its ceiling formed by overlapping stones, creating a corbelled vault over 8 meters high. The king's chamber itself is a marvel of engineering. 5 granite slabs form the ceiling, each weighing between 25 and 80 tons. Above these, 5 relieving chambers distribute the weight of the pyramid above, preventing the chamber from collapsing under the immense pressure. This wasn't trial and error. This was calculated engineering. And yet, despite centuries of study, we still don't fully understand how some of these spaces were constructed. The relieving chambers, for example, are inaccessible except through a narrow shaft. How were those massive granite beams placed with such precision in such a confined space? Then there are the so-called air shafts, narrow passages leading from the king's and queen's chambers toward the pyramid's exterior. For years, these were thought to be ventilation shafts, but they don't reach the surface, and they don't align with any practical function we can identify. In 1993, a robot sent up the southern shaft from the queen's chamber encountered a small stone door with copper handles. Beyond it, another door. The shafts align with specific stars: Sirius, Orion's belt, the northern polar stars, suggesting they had a symbolic or religious purpose rather than a practical one. The pyramid, it seems, was not just a tomb. It was a machine for the afterlife, a stone representation of the pharaoh's journey to the stars. The precision of the pyramid's construction is matched by the precision of its proportions. The ratio of the pyramid's height to its base perimeter is almost exactly the same as the ratio of a circle's radius to its circumference, the number pi. This has led some to speculate that the builders encoded advanced mathematical knowledge into the structure. But there's a simpler explanation. If the pyramid slope was determined by the natural angle of repose for piling stones, or by using a simple measuring technique, such as rolling a drum, the ratio would approximate pi without requiring the builders to know the number explicitly. The same is true for the golden ratio, which some claim appears in the pyramid's dimensions. It's possible these proportions emerge naturally from practical building methods, rather than from deliberate encoding of mathematical constants. Still, the fact that such proportions exist at all, whether by design or by the elegance of the methods used, speaks to the sophistication of the builders. So we return to the question: were the pyramids truly built by the Egyptians? The answer is yes. The evidence is overwhelming. The tools, the quarries, the workers' villages, the inscriptions, the cultural context, all of it points to a massive, organized effort by the ancient Egyptian state under the 4th dynasty pharaohs. But that answer doesn't diminish the achievement. If anything, it makes it more remarkable. The pyramids may not challenge who built them, but they challenge how advanced we believe ancient societies were. For too long, history has been written as a story of constant progress, the assumption that earlier civilizations must have been more primitive, less capable. But the pyramids stand as proof that complexity, organization, and monumental ambition existed thousands of years before the modern age. The ancient Egyptians didn't need lost technologies or outside help. They had knowledge, skill, organization, and time. And they used those things to create something that has lasted 4,500 years. The question isn't whether they could build the pyramids. The question is, what else might they have been capable of that we've underestimated or lost? The Egyptians built the pyramids, but modern assumptions may underestimate the depth of ancient knowledge. History is often simplified after the fact. The truth is usually more complex and more impressive than we imagine. Do you think modern history underestimates ancient civilizations? Which ancient structure should we examine next? Share your thoughts below.